I kept lowering my standards just to keep the peace. He still couldn't meet me halfway, not for effort, not for love. So I stopped trying. He didn't notice until one morning he came home and realized what I'd done. I kept lowering my standards just to keep the peace. It didn't happen all at once. It started with the dishes, then date nights, then birthdays, little slips that on their own weren't deal breakers, but together they became a pattern, a slow erosion. At first, I thought I was just being flexible. Relationships take compromise, right? So when Elias left his dirty dishes in the sink for days, I cleaned them. When he forgot our anniversary and said, "Sorry, work's been crazy," I smiled and said, "It's okay." When he canceled a dinner I'd planned 2 weeks in advance because he just needed a night in, I ordered takeout and ate alone, telling myself next time would be better. Next time rarely came. He stopped trying and I kept compensating. I carried the rent when he was between jobs, even when between jobs turned into working part-time and gaming full-time. I covered groceries, bills, the Wi-Fi, the essentials. When I brought it up gently once, maybe twice, he said, "I'll figure it out, don't pressure me." So I backed off. I thought I was being supportive. I thought he just needed time. But time kept passing and he stayed the same. I'm 31, Elias is 34. We'd been together 4 years, lived together for 3. And I honestly believed we were building something solid, not glamorous, but stable. Only stability means movement, effort, meeting halfway. And I was the only one crossing the distance. I kept adjusting, my expectations, my tone, my timing. I learned to read his moods like weather reports, avoided bringing up anything big if he seemed tense, tired, distracted. I shrank my needs to fit his bandwidth. When I wanted affection, I hinted. When I needed reassurance, I kept it light. I became fluent in emotional labor. He never learned the language. I didn't expect perfection, just presence. Just effort, just someone who cared enough to try. And for a long time, I convinced myself I could live with less if it meant avoiding conflict. My best friend Tarek saw it. We met weekly, drinks, brunch, walks, and he never pushed. But he noticed. "You're always giving," he said once, after I bailaid on our hangout because Elias needed me to run errands he could have handled himself. I shrugged. "It's just a phase, things are tight." Tarek gave me a look, the kind that cuts past excuses. "Adira, he's not in a phase, you are, it's called depletion." That word stuck with me. Depletion. It lived in my bones, in the quiet way I stopped decorating, stopped inviting people over, stopped getting excited about things because I knew I'd have to beg him to care. I still tried, though. I brought up relationship check-ins, he brushed them off. "We're fine," he'd say. "Stop overanalyzing everything." I asked him once what he thought love looked like. He said, "It's when you don't have to talk about it all the time." I realized then he thought love was maintenance-free. A subscription you set and forget. Meanwhile, I was running tech support, customer service, and billing. Every so often, I'd break. Quietly, usually at night. I'd sit in the bathroom with the fan on and ask myself, is this what partnership is supposed to feel like? Then I'd splash water on my face, go to bed, and spoon a man who didn't notice the tears had stopped being occasional. Tarek started getting louder. Not mean, just honest. "You're holding both ends of this thing," he said one night after I vented about Elias forgetting a dinner reservation I made for my birthday. "Maybe he's just not built for this," I whispered, embarrassed. "Or maybe," Tarek said, "he doesn't have to be, because you keep covering for him." That's when something started to shift. Not loudly, just enough. I stopped apologizing for being disappointed. I stopped covering for him in conversations. When people asked, "How's Elias?" I didn't smile and lie. I said, tired, distracted, and not pulling his weight. The truth was heavy, but it was mine again. And when Elias asked me why I was off lately, I didn't give him a rehearsed reassurance. I just said, "I'm tired." He nodded, like I was describing the weather. The last real conversation we had was one I started, like always. I asked if we could talk about reconnecting. Not a fight, not an ultimatum, just something. He sighed, looked at me like I was asking too much, and said, "Why are you always so dramatic?" That's when the last bit of something inside me went quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't argue, I just stopped. Stopped asking, stopped initiating. Stopped performing emotional CPR on a love that had no pulse. For 2 months, I pulled back slowly, gently, like someone peeling off a costume they didn't realize they'd been wearing for years. I became efficient. I paid my half, did my chores, laughed with friends, and gave Elias the same energy he'd given me all along, minimal, passive, surface level. He didn't notice. Not really. Until one morning at 4:46 a.m., he stumbled into the apartment after a night out and realized what I'd done. The bedroom was empty, the closet half cleared, the kitchen echoing. On the counter, a folded note, and his half of the rent in cash. The last time I asked Elias for something real, just effort, just attention, he looked at me with that blank expression I'd learned to dread and said, "You're being dramatic." That was it. Not "what do you need?" or "let's talk." Just a dismissal, smooth and sharp as glass, so I stopped asking. No more calendar reminders for anniversaries. No more careful tone when I brought up the bills. No more emotional buffering between him and the real world. I became the version of myself he seemed most comfortable with, quiet, self-contained, and slowly vanishing. And for 2 months, he didn't notice. Not when I stopped cooking dinner. Not when I stopped making the bed we shared. Not when I turned down his half-hearted invitations to hang out with his friends, the same ones who barely remembered my name. I started moving things out gradually. A few clothes at a time, my favorite mug, my backup charger. I canceled the cleaning service I'd been paying for, split the streaming subscriptions, pulled my name off the lease renewal notice without telling him, transferred my direct deposit to a new account, all logistical, all quiet. I spent nights at my cousin Yuri's, telling him I was staying late for work. She handed me wine, food, her Wi-Fi password. And when I told her what I was doing, she just nodded and said, "About time. You leaving has more dignity than he's ever given you." The final straw was almost laughably predictable. My birthday, I planned a dinner for myself. Just a small thing, 3 close friends, a favorite restaurant. I told Elias a week in advance. The day arrived, and by 6:30 p.m., no text, no call, no "on my way." I sat at the table in a new dress while my friends toasted to my resilience, and I smiled like I hadn't known this would happen. He texted at 9:02 p.m. Shit, lost track of time. "Happy birthday, babe." That night, I finished packing. At 4:46 a.m., he walked through the door reeking of cheap whiskey and someone else's perfume. I wasn't there to smell it. Just his own empty apartment and a note on the counter. It read, "You say you never ask me to change, and I never asked you to notice. So here we are." Next to it, a neat stack of bills. His half of the rent in cash, no fight, no speech. Just everything he claimed he wanted. Peace, freedom, and a clean slate. He got all 3, and none of me. The note sat there, folded clean, center of the counter like a goodbye gift he didn't deserve. "You say you never asked me to change. And I never asked you to notice, so here we are." That was it, no love letter, no rant. Just the truth, small enough to fit on half a page, heavy enough to split the floor beneath him. He called me 11 times. The first 3 were rapid, frantic. Then a break. Then 2 more. Then silence. Then 6 in a row, all within 15 minutes. I watched each one light up my phone from Zuri's couch, where I was wrapped in a blanket and holding a glass of cold orange juice like it was anchoring me to the moment. I didn't answer. Not one. Zuri sat beside me, calm as ever, flipping through a home decor magazine like I wasn't actively ghosting a man I lived with for 3 years. When voicemail 4 came in, she glanced at the screen and said, "Loud, isn't he? Funny how they only find their voice after you leave." I laughed, a tired, broken laugh. Then a real one. We didn't talk much that day. She made pancakes, I watered her plants. At some point we watched a movie with the sound too low and just the subtitles on. It was the kind of silence that didn't ask anything of me. It didn't press for answers. It just held me. Later that afternoon, she handed me a trowel and said, "We're repotting." "What?" "Your plants, the ones you brought. They've been in those cheap plastic containers for years, just like you." I stared at her, she shrugged. "Time for real roots." So we did. We lined the balcony with ceramic pots and fresh soil and transferred each plant, one by one, into something that could actually support them. My hands got dirty. My shoulders unclenched. Something about it felt deeply unfair and deeply healing at once. How easy it was to give life what it needed once you stopped pretending it could survive without it. Zuri didn't say much, just wiped her hands on a towel and said, "This is your reset." That night, I slept on her pull-out couch under a weighted blanket, with 3 repotted plants on the windowsill and a heart that was finally quiet. He showed up at Zuri's 2 days later. Didn't text. Didn't call. Just showed up the way men do when they think proximity might fix what their presence never protected. Zuri and I were mid-laundry, folding towels and listening to a true crime podcast when the buzzer rang. She looked at the screen. Elias. I didn't move. You want me to tell him you're not here? She asked. No, I said. I'll handle it. He was standing outside the door, hoodie on, hair messy, like he thought looking unshaven would communicate regret. The performance of being sorry. You just left, he said. Not hi. Not how are you. Just that, like I was the rude one. Like I hadn't been leaving piece by piece for months. I stepped outside. Zuri stayed in the kitchen, but I could hear the cork squeak from the wine bottle she was opening. Of course. I didn't just leave, I said. I gave you months to meet me, you never moved. He looked stunned, like he expected a breakdown, maybe a hug, a weak smile, something familiar to crawl back into. Instead, he stood in a hallway with a woman who had nothing left to explain. You said everything was fine, he said, quieter now. You stopped asking. You got cold. I mirrored you, I replied. And when you didn't notice, I made it real. He stared at me. I thought we were just going through something. I nodded. I went through it, you stayed still. I didn't cry, didn't scream. Didn't reach for the old script where I comforted him about how much he hurt me. Instead, I stepped back inside and said, take care of yourself. Then I shut the door. Zuri, already pouring 2 glasses of wine, raised hers in my direction and said, well, that sounded like closure. I raised mine back. That sounded like chapter 1. Elias started texting everyone, mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, even Tarek. She ghosted me, he wrote in one group thread. Like, literally just disappeared. Tarek screenshotted it and sent it to me with no caption. Just the image. Below Elias' message, there were 3 unread responses, then Tarek's. She waited longer than most would have. You're just loud because she finally got quiet. I stared at it for a long time, then I smiled. I framed it, not metaphorically. Actually framed it. Zuri helped. We printed it on thick cardstock and put it in a cheap gold frame from the thrift store. It sits on the bookshelf next to my aloe plant. A reminder, not of Elias, of my own silence. How much power it holds. How often women are expected to scream to be heard, while men whisper their version of events into the ears of anyone who will listen. He kept trying to control the narrative. I didn't correct him. I didn't reach out to our mutuals. I didn't argue. Because I didn't need to. Tarek did what real friends do. He spoke the truth, clean and sharp and whole, and people listened. Because it wasn't just about Elias, it was about every version of him that exists in every circle. You can tell a lot about someone by how they talk after you leave, and even more by who defends your silence. I didn't respond to Elias, but I did respond to the Venmo request he sent for his half of the Wi-Fi bill. $45, that's what he thought was worth chasing down. Not me, not the relationship, the Wi-Fi. I stared at it for a second, genuinely amused. Then I hit decline. Added a note, get your own connection. Tarek saw it, Zuri saw it, so did half our old group chat. Apparently someone screenshotted it and sent it around like folklore. My tiny, perfect moment of digital pettiness. It wasn't revenge, I didn't even feel angry. It just felt accurate. Symbolic. A man who ignored every signal finally scrambling to invoice what he never supported. And that was the first clear action he'd taken in months. Blocking me. After everything, after the forgotten birthdays, the unpaid bills, the silence, it was the $45 that finally moved him to act. Zuri texted me, imagine being worth less than a router. I laughed out loud in the middle of the grocery store. A real laugh, from my stomach. Like my lungs were finally allowed to be full again. A month later, I heard he moved in with a guy from work. Split rent, split chores. Suddenly he's learning to cook. Posting meal prep photos with captions like growth mode and starting fresh. He even bought throw pillows, Elias. Pillows? I didn't find out from him, of course not. It was a tagged Instagram story from a mutual friend. Just a casual snapshot of their new place. 2 plates of salmon, wine glasses, and Elias in the background chopping vegetables like he's been domestic all his life. For a second, it stung. Not because I wanted him back, but because he was clearly capable, just not with me. I stared at the photo longer than I meant to, not with jealousy, just clarity. That sharp realization, he didn't grow up. He just got uncomfortable enough to start trying once the stakes changed. Once I was gone. It's funny how quick they evolve when it's not you they're with. I told Zuri over drinks that night, showed her the photo. She glanced at it and said, "That man made toast like it was rocket science for 3 years." We clinked glasses. "To split rent and selective growth," she said. "To throw pillows and the audacity," I replied. Then we laughed. Because sometimes the only thing better than closure is receipts. I didn't leave to punish him. I left to stop punishing myself. For years, I convinced myself that love meant adjusting. That if I could just be a little more patient, a little less sensitive, a little more understanding, eventually he'd meet me in the middle. I made excuses in the name of peace. Shrunk myself for the sake of harmony. But here's what no one tells you: peace that costs your self-respect isn't peace. It's silence dressed as survival. Now, I'm in a new place. Smaller, but it breathes. It is light. Every piece of furniture I chose. Nothing here was built to accommodate someone else's convenience. I bought a new couch. A soft green one with deep cushions, the kind I always wanted but he said was too much. I painted the walls warm white, got real curtains. Not the cheap blackout ones he liked, because they let him sleep till noon. I put my books on actual shelves instead of keeping them in boxes in the closet. I let my plants sprawl. Every corner of this apartment feels like a quiet decision I made for myself. I'm not chasing a new relationship. I'm not dressing my healing up for display. I'm just living, fully, honestly. And I made a rule. The first one I hung above my desk on a small, framed print. "If I have to shrink to keep you, you're already too small." I read it once a day. Not because I need the reminder anymore, but because I earned it. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.